You've been living with a fragile mind, and you know it. Every criticism cuts too deep. Every setback leaves you questioning everything. Every confrontation with reality sends you running back to your comfortable illusions. You tell yourself you're sensitive, that you're empathetic, that you're just processing the world differently. But deep down, you know the truth. Your mind breaks under pressure because you've never learned to forge it into something unbreakable. I'm going to tell you something that will disturb you. Your mental weakness isn't a personality trait, it's a choice. Every day you choose comfort over strength, validation over truth, safety over growth. And every day that choice makes you smaller, more dependent, more afraid of the world and what it might demand of you. But tonight, something changes. Tonight, you stop running from the forge and start building a mind so powerful, so unflinching, so brutally honest that it scares people. Not because you become cruel, but because you become untouchable by the petty fears and desperate needs that control everyone else. Friedrich Nietzsche understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. We are not born strong. We are born weak, dependent, full of needs and fears. But within that weakness lies the raw material for something extraordinary, if you have the courage to destroy who you are in order to become who you could be. He called it becoming who you are. But here's what he really meant. Most people never discover who they actually are because they're too busy being who they think they should be. They live their entire lives wearing masks, following scripts written by others, building their identity on the shifting ground of other people's opinions. But you're going to do something different. You're going to build a mind that belongs entirely to you. A mind that doesn't bend, doesn't break, doesn't need approval or comfort or gentle reassurance. A mind so strong in its own convictions that it makes others uncomfortable just by existing. The method is simple, but it will cost you everything you think you are. Let me show you the disease that's eating your mind from the inside. You call it being reasonable, being considerate, being a good person. Nietzsche had a different name for it: slave morality. You've built your entire mental framework around avoiding conflict, seeking approval, and making others comfortable with your existence. Every time someone criticizes you, you immediately start examining yourself to see if they're right. Every time you have a strong opinion, you immediately start softening it to avoid making waves. Every time you feel the urge to stand up for something, you convince yourself it's not worth the conflict. This isn't virtue. This is mental slavery. You've handed the keys to your mind over to every person who might disapprove of you, every voice that might judge you, every force that might demand you be smaller than you are. Look at how you make decisions. You don't ask, "What do I want?" You ask, "What will people think?" You don't ask, "What's true?" You ask, "What's safe to believe?" You don't ask, "What would make me stronger?" You ask, "What would make me more likable?" This is why your mind breaks under pressure. It was never yours to begin with. It's a committee-designed compromise, built to please everyone, and therefore capable of satisfying no one, especially not you. Nietzsche saw this pattern everywhere he looked. People who had given away their power to think, to judge, to decide what mattered. They had become walking contradictions, trying to hold beliefs that made no sense together, trying to please masters who demanded opposite things, trying to be authentic while wearing masks that never came off. But here's the part that will make you uncomfortable. You chose this, not consciously, but through 1,000 small surrenders. Every time you bit your tongue when you should have spoken. Every time you agreed when you should have argued. Every time you made yourself smaller to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. The good news? If you chose this weakness, you can choose its opposite. But first, you have to see the cost of what you've been doing. Your anxiety isn't a chemical imbalance. It's your mind's natural response to living in constant conflict with itself. Your depression isn't a medical condition. It's what happens when you abandon your own values so often that you forget what they were. Your sense of emptiness isn't a spiritual crisis. It's what's left when you've given away every piece of yourself that mattered. You've been trying to cure the symptoms while feeding the disease, taking medication for anxiety while continuing to live in ways that betray your deepest convictions, seeking therapy for depression while refusing to make the hard choices that would give your life meaning, searching for purpose while avoiding every opportunity to discover what you actually care about. Tonight, that ends. Tonight, you stop managing your weakness and start building your strength. Nietzsche gave us a warning that most people treat as poetry. When you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you. But this wasn't a warning to avoid the abyss. It was an instruction manual. The abyss is where you find out what you're actually made of. The abyss is every uncomfortable truth you've been avoiding. It's the reality of your situation without the comforting lies you tell yourself. It's the gap between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. It's the voice inside you that knows exactly what you need to do, but that you've been drowning out with distractions and excuses. Most people run from the abyss. They fill their lives with noise, with busyness, with endless streams of content designed to keep them from ever having to sit alone with their own thoughts. They medicate themselves with entertainment, with shopping, with social media, with anything that prevents them from facing the fundamental questions about their existence. But you're going to do the opposite. You're going to dive into the abyss and let it show you what you really are underneath all the pretense. Here's your first exercise in abyss gazing. Sit in complete silence for 30 minutes. No phone, no music, no book, no distraction of any kind, just you and your thoughts. Most people can't do this for 5 minutes without reaching for some form of stimulation. Their minds immediately start producing anxiety, boredom, restlessness, anything to get them to stop looking inward. But that discomfort is information. It's your mind telling you that it's been running from something important. The anxiety isn't random. It's your psyche's alarm system going off, because you're finally paying attention to what you've been avoiding. During those 30 minutes, you're going to encounter every fear, every doubt, every uncomfortable truth that you've been keeping at bay. You're going to feel the full weight of every compromise you've made, every opportunity you've wasted, every time you chose the easy path over the right one. Don't run from these feelings. Don't try to solve them or rationalize them away. Just observe them. This is Nietzsche's eternal recurrence in practice. The idea that if you had to live this exact life over and over again, infinitely, would you choose it? If the answer is no, then you know exactly what needs to change. The second part of the method is what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate. Not passive acceptance, but active embrace of everything that has happened to you, including the painful parts. Especially the painful parts. Every trauma, every failure, every moment of suffering in your life has been raw material for building strength. But only if you stop treating it as something that happened to you and start seeing it as something that happened for you. The abuse that taught you to recognize manipulation, the betrayal that showed you the value of loyalty, the failure that forced you to develop resilience. This isn't positive thinking. This is alchemical thinking, transforming lead into gold, poison into medicine, weakness into strength. But it requires you to stop seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances and start seeing yourself as the product of your responses to those circumstances. Write down every major painful experience in your life, not to process them or heal from them, but to identify the strength they forced you to develop. If you can't find the strength, then you haven't finished growing from the experience yet. The pain is still raw material, waiting to be forged into something useful. This is why strong minds scare people. They've learned to transform everything, even suffering, into power. They don't carry wounds, they carry weapons, forged from their wounds. Now comes the part that separates the strong from the weak: self-creation. Nietzsche called it becoming the Übermensch, the overman, the person who creates their own values instead of inheriting them from others. But this isn't about becoming superhuman. It's about becoming authentically human for the first time in your life. Everything you believe about right and wrong, good and bad, success and failure, where did it come from? Your parents, your culture, your religion, your peer group? If you can't point to a moment when you consciously chose these beliefs after examining alternatives, then they're not really your beliefs. They're just programming. A strong mind doesn't accept inherited programming. It examines every assumption, questions every rule, and decides for itself what deserves to be believed. This is terrifying for most people because it means taking full responsibility for your worldview. It's much easier to follow someone else's moral code than to develop your own. But following someone else's code is what creates the internal conflict that makes you weak. You're trying to live by rules that may not fit your actual nature, your real circumstances, your authentic desires. The result is a mind at war with itself, and a mind at war with itself can never be strong. Start with your values. Not the values you think you should have, but the values that actually drive your behavior. What do you spend your time on? What do you spend your money on? What do you think about when no one is watching? These reveal your real values, not the ones you claim to have. Now comes the hard part. Decide if these are the values you want to have. If they are, own them completely. If they're not, change them. But don't do either halfway. Half commitment to your own values is what creates the internal weakness that lets external pressures control you. Nietzsche understood that most people are afraid to create their own values because it means they can't blame anyone else when things go wrong. If you're following someone else's moral code and your life doesn't work out, you can blame the code. But if you create your own code and fail, the responsibility is entirely yours. This is exactly why you need to do it. Because taking full responsibility for your values, your choices, and your outcomes is what transforms you from a person who things happen to into a person who makes things happen. The second aspect of self-creation is developing what Nietzsche called the will to power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. The ability to do what you say you'll do, when you say you'll do it, regardless of how you feel in the moment. Most people are slaves to their momentary emotions. They make decisions based on what feels good right now, what's comfortable right now, what requires the least effort right now. This makes them predictably weak. Anyone who understands their emotional patterns can manipulate them. But a person with developed will to power operates from principle, not feeling. They do what serves their long-term vision, not what satisfies their immediate impulses. They can delay gratification, endure discomfort, and stay committed to their path, even when everything in them wants to quit. This is what makes others uncomfortable. Most people are looking for permission to be weak, for validation of their excuses, for company in their mediocrity. When they encounter someone who consistently does what they say they'll do, who doesn't make excuses, who doesn't need emotional support to keep their commitments, It forces them to confront their own lack of discipline. Start small, but be absolute. Choose one commitment: to exercise, to write, to read, to meditate, and keep it no matter what. Not when you feel like it, not when it's convenient, not when you're motivated. Every single day, regardless of circumstances. This isn't about the specific activity. It's about proving to yourself that you can overcome the part of your mind that wants to quit. Every time you keep a commitment when you don't want to, you make your will stronger. Every time you break a commitment, you make it weaker. Here's what nobody tells you about building a truly strong mind. It will isolate you. Not because you become arrogant or cruel, but because you become immune to the social games that most people use to navigate the world. You stop seeking approval, stop avoiding conflict, stop pretending to believe things you don't believe just to fit in. This terrifies people. Their entire social strategy is built on the assumption that everyone needs something from everyone else: validation, acceptance, permission to exist. When they encounter someone who genuinely doesn't need these things, it breaks their model of how humans work. They'll call you cold, arrogant, selfish, difficult. They'll try to find ways to make you doubt yourself, to pull you back into the game of mutual dependency. They'll be offended by your refusal to be offended, disturbed by your calm in the face of their drama, threatened by your independence from their approval. This is the scarring that happens when you build a truly strong mind. Not that you hurt others, but that your strength exposes their weakness in ways that make them uncomfortable. Your refusal to participate in their anxiety makes them more aware of their own. Your clarity about your values highlights their confusion about theirs. Your willingness to stand alone makes their need for consensus seem pathetic. Nietzsche saw this dynamic everywhere. He watched mediocre people band together to tear down anyone who dared to rise above the common level. He called it the herd mentality, the tendency of weak people to punish strength, to insist that everyone be equally small, equally dependent, equally afraid. But here's the thing: their discomfort is not your problem. Their need for you to be weak is not your responsibility. Their inability to handle your strength is information about them, not about you. In fact, the people who are threatened by your mental strength are exactly the people whose opinions shouldn't matter to you anyway. People with strong minds recognize and respect strength in others. People with weak minds feel threatened by it and try to eliminate it. This is why building a strong mind is ultimately an act of service. Every person who develops genuine mental strength becomes a beacon for others who are ready to do the same work. You become proof that it's possible to live without the constant fear, the desperate need for approval, the mental fragility that most people accept as normal. But you have to be willing to lose the weak people in your life. The relationships built on mutual weakness, on shared complaints, on the comfortable mediocrity of never challenging each other to grow. Some of these relationships can be transformed if the other person is willing to grow too. But many will simply end, and you have to be okay with that. The alternative is to stay weak to keep them comfortable. To continue participating in the collective delusion that mental fragility is normal, that depending on others for your sense of self is healthy, that avoiding difficult truths is wisdom. Choose strength, and you'll discover that while you may lose quantity in your relationships, you gain immeasurable quality. The people who remain in your life will be there because they respect who you actually are, not because they need you to be someone else. I'm going to tell you the truth that no one else will tell you clearly enough. You are one decision away from a completely different life. Not because everything will instantly become easy, but because everything will finally become clear. The decision is this: will you build your life around your strength or around your fear? Everyone else is trying to convince you to manage your weaknesses, to work around your limitations, to accept a smaller version of yourself, to avoid the discomfort of growth. They'll tell you to be realistic, to lower your expectations, to focus on being happy rather than being strong. But happiness built on weakness is just elaborate self-deception. It requires constant maintenance, constant avoidance of anything that might disturb your carefully constructed comfort zone. It's exhausting and it's fragile. And deep down, you know it's not enough. Strength, on the other hand, is anti-fragile. It gets stronger under pressure. It doesn't require protection from reality. It thrives on reality. It doesn't need constant reassurance. It generates its own certainty. The choice is yours, but understand that it's a choice you make with every action, every day. Every time you avoid a difficult conversation, you choose weakness. Every time you compromise your values for acceptance, you choose weakness. Every time you let fear make your decisions, you choose weakness. But every time you face what you'd rather avoid, you choose strength. Every time you act on your convictions, despite opposition, you choose strength. Every time you embrace discomfort in service of growth, you choose strength. Nietzsche understood that most people will choose weakness because it's easier in the short term. But he also understood that the cost of that choice compounds over time until you become something you never intended to be. A person who has forgotten they ever had the choice to be strong. You still have that choice, but not forever. Every day you wait, every year you postpone the hard work of building a mind worthy of your potential. You make it harder to remember who you could have been. Tonight, choose strength. Not because it will be easy, but because easy is what got you here. Not because others will understand, but because their understanding was never required. Not because you feel ready, but because readiness is something you build through action, not something you wait to feel. Take out a notebook. Write down every way you've been choosing weakness. Every compromise that made you smaller. Every time you've betrayed your own convictions for the comfort of others. Look at the pattern. See what it's cost you. Then write down one concrete way you'll choose strength tomorrow. One conversation you'll have. One boundary you'll set. One commitment you'll make to yourself and keep regardless of how you feel. Do this every night until choosing strength becomes as natural as breathing. Until your mind is so unshakable, so self-directed, so absolutely your own, that it becomes impossible for anyone else to control or diminish you. This is how you build a mind so strong it scars people, not through cruelty, but through the devastating power of living according to your own truth. The world needs more people like this. The question is, will you be one of them? The decision starts now. The strength builds tonight. The person you could become is waiting. Choose wisely.